Another episode of Innovative Tac-Tips. I'm Christine Conrad, and I'm the host, and I'm with the wonderful Vladimir Svidesskis. I will say I had to practice that probably before our call and before we hit record. So thank you, Vladimir, for letting me try again. Um, Thank you again. This is a military special series. I had a lot of military influence growing up, and I think it's super important on the business sector side that we talk about it more about military leaders, especially in cybersecurity. Well, being a CISO. So, again, Vladimir, what do you do? And then what about what you do makes your heart sing?
Well, thank you very much, Christine. So my name is Vladimir Svidesskis. You got it. You got it correct. Thank you. And I am the director and head of security, compliance, and risk at Vaco. We're a talent solutions firm just south of Nashville in the city of Brentwood. And my role also includes mitigation efforts for privacy and fraud. And what makes my heart sing in the industry, actually, to help shore up protections for information assets for any owner, whether it's an organization, a vendor, a client, or even an academic institution, someone's going to school, church, or even in the household personal, just to protect individuals' information assets.
Me starting in cybersecurity, it opened up my eyes to a lot more. Again, I've worked in tech before, but I think where you come in, there's a lot of risk involved. And I know risk in like so many ways. And I guess from that, is there a time, I guess, in your tenure where you had a most memorable, I guess, maybe riskier moment that you can share that, um, yeah, just memorable moment? Because from there, I have an additional question, but is there a time in your career that you can remember that one of those risks really impacted um, you or others?
Um, there was some great risky activity where some dollar amounts were going to be shuffled over and like six figures, and someone was going to write a check, and there was a response to an email, and it looked good, and they even called, and the individual was not there to verify, so they were forwarded over to that individual's supervisor, and the supervisor said, yes, it's good. And they were referring to a change in account information. So by the time the exchange went back and forth with a telephone call, it was a couple hours. And then the fraudulent account had already been closed. So when the attempt was made to make that transfer of six figures, it couldn't be done. At that point, they became more suspicious and finally contacted me. And it turns out that you see some cyber malicious actors, what they do is they'll open up an account just for a little while, and if they don't receive the funds or the transfers within a certain while, they'll close that account down. Otherwise, they think that maybe an authority is trying to investigate that account. And the longer they leave it open, the longer that trace route is available to trace back to where it's going. So that was quite risky, and I think that had a lot to do with awareness of what the support channel was, or the advice channel, because we're advisors in information security risk.
Interesting. I guess within that, was there, I guess, within that, I guess, moment, was there anything that obviously changed that person's life, but is there anything during that time, or I guess throughout your career, that something happened that changed someone around you that you didn't expect? Obviously, that's a monumental thing, but is there anything like other than that, it could be outside of work that changed what you did, how you like triage, how you resolve something, change someone's, or even trajectory, right? Like career
Right.
trajectory, like made them
So
want into security
I
or
think mentorship helped. I had a lot of friends in the Atlanta area when I was down there. I'm up in the Nashville area now, and we had a tight knit group of a lot of CISOs, probably about 40 or 50 of them, all my friends, and one of them asked me to mentor them, and they were looking for a mentor, and then they were asking me, if I knew of one. I didn't know of one other than, the 40 or 50 that were sitting there with us. And then that individual just reached out to me directly and says, would you be my mentor? And I was like, I'd be honored to. But after even the first session that we have monthly meetings, and I told that individual, I said, this is actually a two-way street, because this is not one way. I'm not the expert. I'm not the guru. I might have some certain skill set or some focused discipline areas where I am more acutely aware of than that individual, but they are also more acutely aware of certain areas that I have no idea about. So we basically mentor each other, and then we try to come together in some kind of way that we can share that down to the next generation.
I
So
that I love that, because I think people can learn from each other regardless, just regardless. So I guess learning from each other, is there anything that you've learned in your area of expertise, that you've heard that are like bad recommendations, or that you've heard maybe from your mentee that people should be aware of? Just because I
there's a lot
think,
of that.
yeah, I know it's a loaded
So
question, right? Like it's like,
it is. It's quite loaded.
yeah.
I think one of the areas is compromise.
Mhm,
And I'm talking about attestations or configurations. So attestations where you're saying certain things that aren't actually true, or you're just not going to configure something because, well, it's okay. It's probably not going to happen type thing. So saying it kind of complies. If you're reading contracts and a client says you're required to do this, and it's
yeah,
like, if you don't do that, you must say so. It's better to say, well, we don't do that, and then open the dialogue so they can have some kind of assurance. Well, what do you do in that area? Instead of saying,
mm,
well, we did that in one of our offices, but our company as a whole doesn't do it. Can we go ahead and say that yes, we do it? No, don't. It's not kind of okay. There's not kind of compliance. You either do or you don't. Don't lie. So
mhm,
that has to do with ethics. We all know that, and lying, but so many are driven by that. Well, that contract is worth $25 million. I don't want it to hang up just because of one little thing. Like, do you train everybody in this particular aspect? Well, we only train that area or that sector, which isn't applicable to this contract. So
yeah,
I would say be forthright about how you respond to any questions, whether it's a contract or an audit, because what you're also doing is you're also being refreshed in those
mhm,
areas where you think there are challenges
mhm,
within your organization, the client's organization, the vendor's organization, or your partner, or whomever you're dealing with. Challenges are being observed, brought to the forefront. Now you can apply some kind of risk response to it.
yeah,
So I think being forthright is very important. And as far as technical side,
yeah,
well, it's going to take a big lift to configure it this way. Can we just let it go? Do you really think this is going to happen? It's just this one small office. Like, no, let's talk about that and see if we can put in some compensating controls,
yeah,
maybe bring it up so that the
mhm,
executive leadership can make an informed decision as to how they want to treat that risk, accept it, mitigate it, transfer it, reject it.
yeah.
So being forthright is very important.
I had spoken to a colleague, friend of yours, Wes, and we were talking about risk, right? Risk in business and all that stuff. It's like, I think people get so scared of the word risk because I mean, it's a loaded thing, right? Like issues and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like you almost need to open it up, right? Where it's like, okay, what are the pros and cons of this risk? Because I do think like you can move forward, let's say with spending money or whatever direction that your business, or I guess where you want to go in your career, but also like outweigh the risks too, because you can have your cake and eat it too. You just have to be honest, right? Honest of where you're at from like a current climate perspective, and then what it takes to get to wherever you want to go. And I think it's nice to know like leaders in the cybersecurity or just in the tech side that understand risk, but also understand that there needs to be progress at the same time. Um, and with that, I was going to ask you about, because risk is always like a loaded, word.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
and also failure is too, right? Failure, people are like, oh, to me, I think failure is like just throwing in the towel, right? Giving up. And especially when you need to triage issues, and anyways, you just like when things hit the fan, you have to like basically get all on the same page. And so with your career, throughout your career, has there been an apparent failure that has ultimately led to success later in your career?
One was all the way back in high school where
Well,
um, I failed biology because I didn't put forth the effort. So I retook it, and this time I read every single page of that book from beginning to end and thoroughly did every single exercise and task. And you're never assigned every little test or quiz or here's some extra little stuff if you want to try this out. And I did every little thing in that book, and it was a thick book, high school biology 3 and 4. And when we had the final, they would give you like an hour and a half or 2 hours. um, all of a sudden everybody started rushing to sit around me, and I was like, well, that opened my eyes to a cultural aspect and social responses. But then I was put up front at the front teacher's lab table, and I was done in 15 minutes. And I just whizzed through it and when I saw the question, I was like, duh, duh. So the failure in high school biology was like, put forth the effort. You got to try. And I didn't even try. And to make up for it, I swung the pendulum the other way and did every little aspect that there was available. But had I just tried the first year, I'm sure I would have passed easily, no problem. Another that actually spawned the growth of an awareness culture in business, and what I mean by that is, in trying, you can't approach it your own way. You have to understand. Also talks back to the risk statement as well. And I came up with relationship, culture, and communication. You may have seen that moniker on my LinkedIn. And I came up with that because within 5 seconds, or upon meeting somebody, whether it's 5 seconds, 5 minutes, hours, days, weeks, years, you're going to have a relationship with everyone you come in contact with.
mm-hmm.
The extent of that relationship varies, but
Mm-hmm.
what's going to heavily impact that relationship, or the tenor of that relationship, is how much you care right off. When and it doesn't have to be adult, doesn't have to be professional, college student, it can be a little kid. Whenever two people are engaging in some kind of relationship, you can tell if the other person cares by just looking at their eyes. And as they're explaining stuff to you, or you're explaining something to them, and you'll see, are you getting the eyes or the gestures of, I wish this person would finish so I can say what I want to say?
Yeah.
Or is that person totally engaged?
Yeah.
Sometimes to the point they forget what they're going to say, or you forget what you're going to say, because you're listening so much, and you're establishing, you're getting an idea of that individual. So with that relationship, you have different types of relationships. You have, what did I put in here? You have a transactional relationship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can have a personal relationship or professional relationship. So in information security, right off the bat, we get hit with vendors right off the bat, and it's like, okay, right off, they want a sales. Like, other vendors approach and they go, this has been going on. This is what we're thinking about. What do you think about it? So now they're starting to get in the professional side. That's from transactional to professional. Sometimes you can get a personal relationship out of that too. You might end up going, being social about it.
Yeah.
So dealing with relationship, when you care enough to listen, you understand the individual. You're starting to get an idea of the culture of that individual, where they're generally from, how they respond, what what jazzes them, and what really turns them off, and you start understanding them. So if you have that relationship, you care about sharing bidirectionally, you get an idea of the culture. That sets the basis on which you can land your communication. Now you can articulate to your audience.
I do have a question to go back to my, like when I asked you what made your heart sing. I think it's so interesting in cyber, like I'm fairly new in this side of tech, and I think it's interesting because there's so much information that is being technical information, right? Detailed information that is being communicated back and forth, and sometimes you're so focused on the, I guess, the language at hand, right? Like almost like the process at hand, and um with that, how do you, I guess, how can you recommend to kind of gauge or like understand how someone is trying to go, I always say go to market because it's like such a business term, but how they go to market when they speak with you. And we can use vendors because I think technically I am a vendor, but again, I don't, not to get technical, right? But the question is like, how do you, I guess, flesh that out? How they, what kind of relationship or what kind of rapport they're trying to have.
So how do they, when they're trying to reach their goals, I think the most important things to come up from and see what the business case is. What is the business case? Instead of walking into the room and saying, here's my bag of tools and skills, and I'm going to do this, I can do this. It's like, you know
Yeah.
what? Some people aren't astute, or they're not in the same vibe as you, or they're not in the same industry or focused. You can keep
Yeah.
your tools. They're valuable, to be sure, but hold
Yeah.
on to them and listen
Yeah.
first and ask the questions. If you're asking like your executive leadership team or maybe even the board, you can ask things such as, what do you think information security is? And listen,
Mm,
now you're starting to get their perspective, their lens, and you jot that down. And the second question, just two,
yeah.
what are you most concerned about? Now you know what their interpretation of information security is. You know what they're mostly
Mm,
concerned about. Now you can
yeah.
look in that tool bag and makes a few offerings, just a few. What do you think
Yeah.
about this? If we put that in there and that would drive there, what concerns would you have about us aligning that
Yeah.
with your approach and your strategy? Or what's
Interesting.
the cost they're going to ask? Or what's the time resource? And you have to be ready to respond with those answers as well. But
Yeah.
don't go out dumping your tool sets. So you got to find out what the business case is, or find out what they're trying to attain.
Yeah. Yeah. What, I guess what you said, what they're concerned about, or what, yeah, what is their, because some people, it's not even about, again, there's different walks of life, right? Sometimes it's even about the time that they have, right? Like they only have 5 minutes. And so their brain is on something else. And it's like, okay, do you have 5 seconds or 5 minutes? Anyways, just, yeah, asking that initial question and then asking, a follow up, I think is the best advice because sometimes I think we assume. I know I all the time I assume and I'm like, "Ooh, that was not, I'm gonna come back later. I'm gonna rewind this and I'll come back and I'll, like we'll have this again." But yeah, it's just I completely 100% agree. So with that question I asked you, is there anything like maybe books or podcasts or something that you have digested intellectually throughout your life that you have given most as a gift or have like basically has offered to people to look into that might have greatly influenced your life as well? Is there anything, could be a podcast,
I think
could be an article, I don't know, you know what I mean, any of those things?
so. I tried to share as much as possible on LinkedIn that key my interest or pique my interest. But as far as the book and sharing a book and naming books and such. I think it goes back to a little bit of history. If I can give some background, I think one of the absurd thing that I've done previously growing up, even from high school on, is I actually read a dictionary from A to Z.
Wow.
Um, so I don't know why, but I
Yeah.
did. And I was like, wow, I didn't know this word meant that. I didn't know it had more than that. What's this word? So I learned new words and I learned more in depth about certain words that I
Yeah.
thought I already knew, including etymology and parts of speech, examples and stuff. So I've read, a dictionary, encyclopedia, I read technical manuals, from cover to cover. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous sometimes. And I think my wife thinks I'm weird because I read EULA's, the end user license agreement. Like I've read the terms and conditions for Chat GPT. That's a interesting read. But
Yeah.
so what do I do as far as gifts? I've given CISSP book, the ISC squared CISSP Common Body of Knowledge book to a couple people. That's what I give as gifts, as those right there. But that kind of like coincides with some weird things I've done or habits I've had before. Is, I buy a brand new tool, I'll read the entire book from cover to cover first, and I'll understand. And a lot of that stuff is mundane, repetitive, but it brings
Yeah.
safety to the forefront or warranty information to the forefront.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's kind of weird, I guess. But as far as
No,
gifts,
again, you're like I was gonna say you're like a word doctor in a sense, right? Like, because when you go to medical school or when you have to like, or even like just cybersecurity or just security and risk in general, compliance, you have to study, you know, processes like not acronyms, but yeah, like you have to, like there's a dictionary almost for that, right? There's like a resource book for
yeah.
that, and
The thing
I
is, when
think
you
it's
write
important.
when you
Yeah,
write policies and procedures, you got to watch out for the wording too. So it's helped me in certain areas, but I also want to make sure I don't get over my skis and speak in legal sense because I'm not a JD. So, but there is a
yeah,
difference between can and may and shall when you're putting policies, procedures, and guidelines together. So it helps.
yeah. So with all of the words, again, there's probably like nuances words that like are like pop culture, right? I'll make jokes about how like there's new words that I'm like, oh, interesting. I wonder what Shakespeare would think of that word. Probably would roll in his grave, but we're just not going to talk about that. So with like just what you studied, if you could have a gigantic billboard that would reach billions of people, what would you put on it?
Probably relationship, culture, and communication, and then the subtitle would be engage, understand, and share. Slow down and listen. Engage and share. And what that does is that opens up a dialogue between two people. Slow down,
Yeah,
engage people, try to
yeah,
understand, and try to share your perspectives. From there, it's not being all utopia and you're all going to agree with each other and be drinking buddies, so to speak. But at
yeah,
least you'll get a perspective and you'll understand. Maybe there's some things about that other perspective which you don't in totality agree with, but there might be some components that you might find valuable whether
yeah,
to strengthen your own or to adopt as your own.
totally. No, I like that. And then I want to ask you a couple more questions with that, like with the billboard thing. I kind of want to dive into those because did that come from like early on in your life, like those phrases, or like what? I guess what was the catalyst of
I
creating
think I
those? Just
saw
yeah.
in, at an engineering firm, I was there for 13 years,
Mm,
and that's my first civilian job after I got out of the Marine Corps. And I saw a lot of structure there was good, but there was a lot of areas of soft skills that were like surprising to me, like going to the kitchen, the office kitchen, and there's a sign that says, do not eat other people's food. And I'm like, huh? That's a thing? I was straight out of the military after 10 years. Like, isn't that a thing when you're like an adult? You only eat your food? Who's eating someone else's food? There's at an engineering firm, most people, they all have degrees. About
mhm,
half of them have masters in engineering, and
yeah,
about 25% have PhDs in engineering. I mean, you're eating other people's food. So I see that that's a cultural understanding. It's like, what is that? And then I find that in the regimentation, it's like that's an engineering, so they're driven by the client and by the money. But then over here in this area, it's totally lax, and it's like they have internal regulations. Don't worry about that. They're just written on the wall to say that we do have them, but we're focused on the client. We'll pick that up later if we have time, but we just keep charging forward. And it just seems like there was like kind of a mismatch here of certain elements within that organization that was like, it's like, how is this place still functioning? Okay, I get it. So I really backed out and started to think about that. And relationship comes from, I think, behavior and conduct. Because there's a lot in behavior and conduct you see in the military, and you try to assess your enemy by their behavior and conduct, and you try to apply behavior and conduct that's superior to that, so you can apply and counteract what they're doing. And you can kind of bring that in the cyber sense too, because you don't just go, you know what, I need these policies, I need these procedures, I need these guidelines, and we're going to whack all these cyber malicious actors out. That's it. Well, you got to understand what their culture is.
Yeah.
How are they relating? Why are they doing this? The same reason why you do with your clients. Well, what's your client's business case? Well, what's the malicious actor's business case? What? So you're understanding that, and that gets into threat intelligence. And there's an aptitude there to think about that instead of just reading, okay, you got to have the policy that you cannot do this. You got to have controls that stop you from doing this. But if you don't understand that and have an overarching thought process of why you're doing this, I think you're being static, you're just checking boxes, and you're going to plateau very soon. Whereas you think about it and you share and understand with others, your clients, your vendors, your partners, even internally. I don't make decisions in a silo on my own. I always look out to my engineer or analyst, say, I'm going to present this. What do you think? Honest feedback. Because this isn't my chair. I'm a steward of the role. I'm not the role.
Yeah. Yeah, no, okay. 2 questions left, just because I think this will be helpful for people listening. Because again, I think in life we get overwhelmed, we get worked up, and you said something like slow down, like, obviously listen, all that stuff. And I think when we're so worked up, sometimes it's hard for us right away to like have that, like, I guess, logic, rationale, right? Like we're kind of like in fight or flight mode in a sense, where we're like worked up. What do you do to help you come down and take a step back and breathe? And like, I guess, is there like any habits, or like, is there any things that you taught, like, what do you do to like help calm yourself down where you can think clearly, rationally, at work or just in life?
I kind of make a few changes at different levels and scales. And the immediate one is the visual and the environment. So at my desk, I'll have a picture of my family, or I'll have I got a little Jesus over here, and I got my Bluetooth over here, and I've got this over there. Now and then, I'll move them around. My wife will pick some flowers out there and put it in a vase, and because it's the only thing growing in my office, and she'll put it there at the corner of my desk, I'll move it to a different spot. And when you do that, it's no longer furniture. But if you put your pictures up and you leave them there for years, it becomes furniture. You don't even realize it's there anymore. So that's the first thing I do, is every couple of months, try to move things around in your desk in your office. It's like, oh, wow, I got to remember this. But that's more in the background, so to speak. But there are times, because working with security, compliance, risk, privacy, fraud, third-party management, and you get hit all at once. Sometimes it's Friday at 3 p.m. They go, can we get this done by today? Boom. Like, this is it? Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll put a pause on. I'll just stand up and go for a walk, a quiet walk, change my environment, refocus. It's not because like I'm going out and I'm kicking things or I'm throwing something or I'm like, oh, but you know what? I've been sitting here for how long? It's like, no, I need to get up. I need to walk. So I'll do that throughout. It's like, people who smoke cigarettes, they'll take a smoke break. And I'm wondering what that does for them to recharge or refresh, because they're driving and driving and driving. All of a sudden, they're getting up and walking out. They're changing their environment. I think that's healthy and it helps. Not the smoking part. but
No, true.
getting up and walking around
Getting some fresh
because
air, getting fresh air, getting
whether
sun,
it's outside, yeah. Sometimes my wife will say, she'll bring me something, and I'll say, you don't have to bring it. Let me know, text me or call me or come to the door. Let me know so that I
Mhm,
get up and walk away from the office. I need to walk away. I need to stand up. I'll
mhm,
even if I raise the desk and lower the desk, that's fine. But sometimes I go to the front yard. Sometimes I go to a different room in the house. Sometimes the
mhm.
backyard. But it's good to just change your environment a little bit, just to refocus. Otherwise, you're having this, what's this, 3 foot focus, 2.5 foot focus all day with computer light.
Yeah. And it actually, like, you shut down, you actually perform worse whenever you don't, like, just change your environment. So that's really smart. And I say, like, I'm gonna go touch grass, like, get outside,
Yeah,
go, like, actually, like, being intact, like, yeah, you're kind of in the zone, right? And so it's like, go outside. There's a bigger world. There's, like, the sun. Anyways, all of that stuff. Well,
I
thank
know
you.
people that'll
Uh,
block
yeah,
out their lunchtime.
yeah. Yep, take at least, like, a good half an hour break and walk outside. So last question for you. If people wanna get a after listening to this episode, how can people get in contact with you if they have any questions or wanna learn more about your background or military questions or, like,
Oh yeah,
basic leaving
there's
the
a lot
military,
there too.
business, all of that stuff? How can they get in
So I
contact with
just do
you?
LinkedIn. That's all. Is LinkedIn. So it's easy. Just Vladimir, and you put SV in there, and I'm probably the only one in there.
Great. Well, thank you again for your time, and I appreciate your service and your service in cybersecurity as well. So, or just in risk and compliance. I shouldn't say cybersecurity because it's more than just that.
Right. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just like that's kind of been like programmed in my brain to say. So, anyways, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Christine. Have a great day.